Good morning. I'm Brady Harding, and this is Abby Ellinger, and thank you for attending our presentation. For the record, I am not a professional speaker. I also don't sing, dance, juggle, or make wild animals disappear from the stage. However, I am an architect who, through a series of unfortunate events and decisions, ended up in a 2.5-year legal battle with one of the largest corporations in America. I hope to try to make this as interesting as possible, because this is somewhat of a dry subject, we know, and it might have been a little easier to make it interesting had Al actually let me bring some of the wild animals up onto the stage, but that didn't get to happen.
As Brady said, I'm Abby Ellinger, and I serve as General Counsel for Interbrand Design Forum and Design Forum Architects, and was intimately involved with this case at every step of the way. And because of that, I now know more about HVAC systems and arid environments than any attorney ever should. And I was thinking last night that this is probably the only venue where that would be interesting conversation at the cocktail party. So if you want to talk about evaporative cooling, I'm your girl. And the other thing is that contrary to what Brady just said, he does juggle, but I really don't encourage you to ask him to show you. For those of you who are receiving AIA credits, these are our learning objectives, and we truly hope that you learn all of these objectives, but I'm going to move quickly to the next slide because it's my favorite.
I work for Design Forum Architects, and yes, we work in a barn in Dayton, Ohio. With our office being in Ohio and most of our clients are nationally based, most of the people are kind of amazed that we're not all a bunch of corn farmers when they come to see us. So we thought the barn was kind of the appropriate motif. That's Bob in the front there. He's one of our 2 goose dogs that we have running the property to keep the parking lot clean. DFA has been around for about 33 years, and I've been there for about the past 20. Interbrand, which is a global branding company, purchased us about 8 years ago, and DFA remains an independent firm of Interbrand.
And obviously there are legal reasons why Design Forum Architects had to remain independent of Interbrand, but I won't bore you with those details. We can just say that they both work hand in hand and have a great working relationship on a daily basis.
As you can see, we have 36 offices in 24 countries now via Interbrand. We are, again, according to Financial Times, we're the world's leading branding consultancy company. Interbrand Design Forum, or in conjunction with Design Forum Architects, we handle all the physical environmental spaces for our clients.
What that means is that we create retail environments, and we create them from start to finish, meaning from the research through the design, both environmental and graphic, through the finished selection, onto the architecture and engineering with rollout capabilities as well. And also we get involved highly in retail at the product level, which we like to call consumer packaged goods.
As she said, we specialize in architectural rollouts. We're sort of the Henry Ford of architects. We are licensed in all 50 states in architecture, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineering. We've got a somewhat unique look at what retail is, where we look at it as traditional retail, banking, and automotive dealerships. And if you think about it, we hit with between banking, retail, and automotive. We had the trifecta for the financial downturn, but we did manage to survive that. As you can see, Interbrand came into play in 1974, and that's a snapshot of our Dayton staff, or Dayton office staff, where we have about 150 people there. The majority of all the architecture, mechanical, electrical, plumbing work all comes out of the Dayton office.
Yep, in fact, in the whole Interbrand network, there are only 2 other offices that do provide architectural services, and those are Paris and Zurich, and obviously they're focused on our European markets.
Over the years, we've worked with most of the major auto brands, and today, I think we've designed just over 3,000 dealerships. We also have done prototype design work for most of those companies up there over the years. And for those of you who aren't familiar with prototyping, what we'll actually try to do is come up with a cookie cutter design that'll have all their branded elements, and it's something we can basically just plop down in any city, anywhere. Although we all know that that's not too much of a reality due to you never seem to get the perfect site or the perfect planning and zoning board to ever want to work with you on that. But we have established ourselves as an authority in the automotive dealership program. So some years back, it wasn't all that surprising to us when Chrysler came to us and asked us if we would build or help them do the documentation for the Las Vegas prototype that we had been working on. Again, we had been working on the design elements of this for some time, but we had only gotten it to, as the architects like to refer to it as, the pretty picture phase. We hadn't done any CDs or anything to this point. We always like getting into the reality phase. It's always fun bringing all these wonderful designer details into an actual detail, but we always like to make sure that we have ample time to get that all done correctly. But then we find out that we're not actually going to be hired by Chrysler, a corporation that we've been working with for the past, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 7 years, but we're going to be hired by Chrysler Realty. hanging out with. They wanted to keep the contracts separate, so our rollout teams just kept on producing their drawings, and we could have our own group working on this. But we thought, no big deal. Well, the project that we have to build now is a 68,000 square foot facility with 38 service bays, about 900 parking spaces, and on approximately a 10-acre site. And again, we are only in the pretty picture phase. We have no construction drawings. We have no structural drawings, no MEP, no civil, no any details at all. In fact, I said some of the details were still defying the laws of gravity when we're looking at the pictures. And we actually now are being told that we have a site in Las Vegas, but it's actually just outside of Las Vegas in Clark County. And for those of you familiar with Nevada and the Clark County thing, that brings in a whole new level of dilemmas that we have to deal with. The site had been purchased, and it was the right size, and we had the utilities in place, we're being told, and everything's ready to go. And Chrysler Realty tells us that they have a local dealer who has some great connections in town, and he'll be able to help us with the permitting. Well, then they throw out the small little caveat that, oh yeah, by the way, the CDs, permitting, and construction has to be done in 7 months. Well, it turns out there was an NADA show coming up in January, and there were 800 dealers flying in from all over the country, and they wanted us to be able to showcase the dealership to all the dealers across the country. Bottom line is the end date cannot move. This was a complete surprise to us, as none of us knew this was coming up. Now, looking back, this is where I kick myself. I'm used to challenging projects, and I know what our limitations are, and we're also not new to the Las Vegas market. We had an extensive rollout program going in Vegas, and over the 3 previous years, we had done over 100 projects in the Vegas market. I start running a timeline in my head, and I start thinking, okay, I've got at least 2 months for CDs, 6 months at least for permitting, just trying to get through the whole Clark County process, and at least 8 months for construction. So I'm already double the timeline of what we need. And I'm prepared to tell them there's just no way we're going to follow up with this. And then the CEO of our company calls me into his office and says, you know, he goes, this is a really important client, and this is where it starts getting fuzzy. And I swear I was about to say no, and the next thing I know, I'm on a plane flying off to Las Vegas. Again, to meet the Chrysler Realty team and not Chrysler. Now, I don't know how many of you actually have read the book Blink, but the main premise of the book is to trust your first instinct or your gut feel in a situation. Unfortunately, I had not read this book prior to our first meeting with Chrysler. We meet with the team now. We've got a general contractor who Chrysler brought in, the Chrysler Realty team, us, the dealer that's local, civil engineer that we had brought in, and then several consultants that CRC had that we really weren't quite sure what their roles were yet, but they bring us all into a dingy hotel conference room, and the lead person from Chrysler Realty sits us all down, and first opening comment was, this is a succeed or die situation. Now, we haven't had any intros. I haven't even had a donut yet. Well, then he starts to proceed to say that the last time that they had tried a project like this some years ago, everybody on the project had been fired, and 3 of the people from Chrysler had over 30 years experience, and they were all fired. Well, at this point, I'm thinking it's time to make a run for it. This is my Blink moment. I assess the situation, though, and unfortunately, there's at least 10 people between me and the door. I had a bad seating situation, so I realized I'm kind of stuck sitting here with them. Well, we start to all calm down and start discussing it in reality. And the first thing I bring up is, I said, what are we going to do about permitting? The local dealer stands up, he says, not a problem. He goes, I've got all kinds of friends in city council and such. He goes, won't be an issue at all. We'll be able to get it to move right through the whole process. The GC then gets up and he says, he has been working for quite a while with Chrysler, and he's a very reputable firm. And he gets up and says that he is convinced that he could build this building in 5 months if he has the permit in hand. So now we know if all the stars are aligned and nobody sneezes, we can get this thing possibly done. Well, now we leave this meeting, and the client comes up to me afterwards. He goes, Brady, don't you think we ought to scrap this whole project? And now I'm confused. I'm trying to figure out where he's coming from, and it's obvious the fact that Chrysler Realty doesn't want to build the project. And I get thinking, it suddenly hits me that they don't want to be the ones to tell Chrysler Corporate that they can't build the project, and they also don't want to be the ones to fail building the project. So, and this was my easy point now where I could have just cut bait and run, but no, the egotistical architect in me came out and I said, yeah, we can do this. So, and again, now we still don't have that warm and fuzzy feeling going with the client, but I call back to Dayton and I express my concerns like, guys, this doesn't feel good. And they all kind of laughed it off, said, just keep going, we're all right. So, meanwhile, I call my team and let them know that we need to start documenting every conversation, save every email, make sure that we're extremely diligent about what we're documenting.
So I joined Design Forum in January of 2003, having graduated from law school in 2002. And very fortunately for me, nobody gave anybody at DF the memo that you shouldn't hire in-house counsel right out of school, because they did. And obviously 9 years later, it's worked out beautifully. But I came into this with no background whatsoever in design, architecture, engineering. I came from a background in immigration law. So I would sit in these meetings and I would listen to all of these acronyms that you all have and throw out, and I would write down furiously and then go back to my office and try and figure out what the heck you were talking about. In any event, one of the very first contracts that I was presented with when I started there was with Chrysler Realty Corporation. And as you can imagine, I was like, okay. And it was a fairly modified AIA, which they were not very amenable to changing. In any event, after several rounds of revisions, we did get through it, and the contract was signed on April 13th of 2003. Which incidentally was quite a ways through the documentation process already.
Now I go back to our group, and we engage 3 teams now. We have one group just working on planning and zoning, one working on permitting, and one working on construction documentation. Our civil engineer, who was a local civil engineer in the Vegas market, he's got a team working 24/7 trying to put together a package so we can get in for our grubbing permit. 3 of the city council members are under federal indictment for bribery and corruption charges, which meant basically that nobody at city or county level was wanting to talk at all about expediting any drawings in any way, shape, or form. Then we discovered that the dealer over the course of the last few years has managed to alienate just about every department in the city. We then confirmed with the city that the civil grubbing permit is going to take at least 6 months, and then we have to go to the Army Corps of Engineers, and we need another 2 months. So at this point now, we're in panic mode. We send 2 people out to Las Vegas who are basically going to live there now. And they're moving in, and they're going to do nothing but go door to door, plead our case, and walk through with everybody. And I have to admit, Clark County turned out to be a wonderful group to work with. They helped us in every way they possibly could. We also had many trips where we were flying back and forth to Los Angeles, working with the Corps of Engineers. And it's even rumored at one point that Chrysler had gotten the governor involved to help us get a few things pushed through. Now, it was still obvious, though, that the client was still opposed to the project. And we're well into the CDs at this point. And we get a phone call. He said, we just decided that we have to change the scope of the back service bays, and we're going to knock 9,000 square feet out of the building. So we meet with all the jurisdictions again, who we've already been in contact with, and everybody is fine. We're going to keep the project moving because we weren't changing the intent of the project that greatly. But then we started having some issues where we started having some meetings with the client and such, and we suddenly discovered that the client consultants were to be taking all the meeting notes and issuing all meeting notes to everybody involved, and that we were not supposed to be issuing notes. Well, the first set of notes come out, and it's obvious that the notes are all skewed in one direction. We immediately have to start amending notes, reissuing everything, and it became very, very contentious for a while here. And then we had issues while we're doing the documentation. While we have questions and issues, we call the client, and we can't get any answers. It was a total uphill battle through the whole process with the documentation team. Then one day we get a phone call from the client, and he says he wants to have a drawing review. Well, we're elated. We finally get to get some more questions answered. Well, he wants to have the drawing review in Dayton the very next day. So we clean up everything best we can, get everything, all the drawings ready to go. And the client shows up, but to our surprise, he shows up with his own architect and a whole new set of design and plans. We're all scratching our head now trying to figure out what's going on, and his notion was that he thought they could build this building, although it had some good ideas, and it had a lot of the prototypical elements. It wasn't the same building, but he thought they could build it faster. Well, we immediately have to halt everything. There's frantic phone calls going back and forth to Detroit, and eventually then everybody finally convinces him that he needs to pack everything up and go back home, that we're going to stick with the original design that we had. Well, now we finally learned what the role of the local dealer was going to be, and it's that after the show, and after they've done showing it to all 800 dealers, the local dealer is going to purchase the building from Chrysler Realty, and he's going to be functioning as a Chrysler Dodge Jeep dealership. But then we get a phone call from him where he's stating he has some special needs because it is going to be his building at the end. And they're just minor things. One of those was he wanted to have a cafe in the middle of the showroom where he could serve hot dogs, hamburgers, and French fries to their customers. The other was that our signature black flooring that we had throughout the sales floor, he wanted that to be a red and white checkerboard ceramic tile. Well, we're panicked. We call back up to a CRC, the Chrysler Realty Corporation, and explain to him what the items are that are coming up. They convince us, don't worry about it. We've got it under control. We'll talk to him. You work for us, not him. Well, things then seem like they're finally going a little smoother again, and now we get another phone call. This to have another drawing review. This time it's with the dealer in Las Vegas. So we pack everything up, fly out the next day out to Las Vegas, unroll the drawings, and he has obviously not been clued into any of this. He explodes and just goes into a rant that I can't get into what all he was calling us, but let's just say we won't say it in mixed company. After about a good 30 minutes of this, we finally asked the people at Chrysler Realty to please get up and explain to him what's going on. Well, the entire Chrysler Realty team then gets up and leaves. We're now stuck in this room for the next 2 hours of this gentleman basically berating us. Now, I'm thinking, how to defend ourselves, but I understand that now, if he's going to be the end user, do I tell him what CRC's direction was, and the project could end up stopping, and nobody gets paid, nothing gets built, the whole thing collapses immediately, or do we complete our work with our own contract with Chrysler Realty? Well, we end the meeting, we just let it go, we took his notes, and we went on. I call back to Dayton. At this point, I'm requesting legal counsel. Now again, I don't know what she does. She's downstairs, she sits next to our CEO, and I'm not quite sure what Abby's role is. I'm just saying we need help here. So everybody again convinces me to calm down, and I again call all my team members and say, guys, copious notes. As I said before, we do mechanical, electrical, plumbing, engineering work internally, and our MEP guys have been working frantically trying to get their work done, and they came up with the initial load where they're going to have 270 tons of cooling on this building. But we try to set up a call with the dealer, with Chrysler Realty to discuss this with them, and after a couple of weeks, we finally get a response. He calls back and he says, absolutely no way. He said he wants 100 tons less cooling in the space. He had done one in Texas of similar scale and nature, so there's no way they're going to do that. He said what they would recommend, though, is we could cut back, like they only want to have the delivery and service bays cooled to 85 degrees on a 100-degree day. Well, and he also wanted to use swamp coolers, which is evaporative coolers. And those of you not familiar, it's basically, I guess, just blowing air through a moist medium and letting the evaporation cool the air. Oh, and then Chrysler threw one more last little thing out to us. They wanted nothing on the roof. No rooftop units, no exhaust fans, nothing. So basically our engineers are starting completely back over again at this point. They're ready to kill me because they're convinced we haven't been sharing enough information with them. So they end up now calling up some local installers and dealers in the Vegas market to see what all our options are. And the first thing we understand, though, is we have to now build a huge mechanical yard adjacent to the building, and we have to revise all of our civil drawings. Well, 77 days of begging and groveling our way through the process, we get to a grubbing permit. It's proof that miracles do happen in Clark County. But then we discovered a small issue out on the job site where we discovered that the county drawings that they had on file with the engineer's office weren't quite as accurate as we thought they might have been. And it turns out that the water and gas, they were available, except they were available, water was a mile to the south and gas was a mile and a half to the north. Well, at this point now we have to pull 2 new subs into play at the project, and they're pulling pipe frantically, but we're all convinced now we've got a black cloud or a curse on this project. But after that, we get through, and about 19 days later, we actually end up pulling out a building permit. And we are now almost exactly 5 months of the NADA show. Coincidentally, the day after we get the building permit, we get the signed contract from Chrysler Realty. Makes me kind of believe that he did mean that nobody gets paid if it doesn't get done on time. We now have 2 new guys out on the ground in Las Vegas to handle all the construction administration. They're going to handle all the RFIs, all the submittals, everything on site, and they're going to be on site for the entire length of the process. Now, I have to admit I've experienced a lot less stressful jobs or construction projects, but in all accounts it went fairly well, and there was actually no major bloodshed. Okay, by all accounts, the GC did a great job. It was a great project for them to do. They actually got it done in 117 days from when they broke ground, and they turned it over well in advance of the NADA show. We then start getting calls, letters, emails from everybody from Chrysler Corporate, Chrysler Realty, congratulating everybody on the team. We were all heroes. Everybody was ecstatic. We sent photographers out to photograph the building, put it in our portfolio. Everything was wonderful.
And keep in mind, during this entire process, I was not apprised or familiar with anything that was going on other than the contract, either the successes or the challenges. As Brady said, I was very new and nobody knew what to do with the attorney because it is a very scary word, and there's a reason I don't work with other attorneys. I like architects and engineers a lot better. And I'm sure that anybody in this room now knows that if you have somebody on retainer or in-house, and we would have done this now, we would have had risk meetings at every step of the way to just kind of assess the situation, what was going on. And when these challenges arose, I would have been copied on all of the notes. And for two reasons. One, in the event that maybe I could help mitigate something, which, maybe. And two, in the event that we would get into a legal situation, anything that I would have been copied on in anticipation of litigation would have then been protected.
Yeah, and in hindsight, we would have loved to have engaged Abby had we known what her role actually was at that point. Meanwhile, now the show is done, and the dealer has purchased the building from Chrysler Realty. Now the dealer's moved in, he's starting to function as a car dealership, and he can't understand why he can't get his service bays and his delivery areas to cool to anything less than 85 degrees. Turns out that Chrysler had never mentioned this little detail to him when he went through the whole purchase process. Well, he also still was not too pleased about having to install his own floor and cafe, but we had worked through that earlier in the process, and we had been somewhat proactive. We had given him stub-ups for power and had extra panels and such, to help him, but he still wasn't too pleased with us. He still thought we were incompetent at something or another. Meanwhile, now he hires a HVAC engineer / supplier / installer to evaluate his existing system. Needless to say, the guy comes back and says that the entire system is poorly designed and is under-designed. They proceed now to rip out the entire system in the entire building and replace the whole thing with brand new rooftop units. They had never consulted us or notified us of anything being wrong whatsoever through the entire process.
So, on November 11, 2004, our CEO, Lee Carpenter, received a demand letter from Chrysler Realty and Chrysler Corporation in conjunction for $1.4 million. And he brings it to me and says, Abby, what do we do with this? And I said, well, you call the bank. But no, I really didn't say that. He wouldn't have liked that very much. What we did do was get the entire team pulled together to run through the process, look at our notes, look at everything, and make sure that we had not under-designed the system. After review of the documents and talking to the team, we were confident that there had not been a design flaw and that we had done everything in accordance with Chrysler's request.